On Friday, Justin Trudeau said he believes Trump is serious about making Canada the 51st state. The threat of American tariffs on Canadian products still looming, with the possibility of 25% being smacked on Canadian steel and aluminum today. So what does this do to the relationships between everyday Canadians and Americans? Coming up, we'll hear from Canadians living in the States, and we'll take you to a border community with North Dakota, where cross-border cooperation is essential for everything, including the local volunteer fire department. There has been a rise in Canadian nationalism, but the Premier of Saskatchewan says he wants to stay on friendly terms with Americans.
You know, there's going to be a lot of political rhetoric that will fly around over the foreseeable future, and please look past that. Please look past that to the broader relationship that we in Saskatchewan and we as Canadians have had with the United States of America. They largely are our greatest ally. The odd time they win the Stanley Cup, and that's unfortunate if you're an Oilers fan. But largely, our relationship has been a strong one with the United States of America and with our American friends. And that's the first thing, is keep the long-term broad view in what's happening on a day-to-day basis.
So our question for you today is tension with the U.S. bleeding into your relationships with American friends and family? How are you navigating that? Give us a call, 1-800-716-2221. You can also email bluesky@cbc.ca. Anne Ward is a Canadian citizen. For years, she taught American politics at the University of Regina's Campion College, and now she's at Baylor University in Waco, Texas. She is a permanent resident and is one of our connections to the conversations happening south of the border. She joins us on the show right now. Anne, welcome to Blue Sky.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. Thank you for inviting me. And I have to say, I did live in Regina for 12 years, so I feel for you for the cold.
Yeah, it is cold. Not only is it cold, we're living in some really wild times. It's hard to make sense of it all. So I'm wondering, as a Canadian, what do you make of the current relationship between Canada and the U.S.?
Well, first of all, let me think. I think it's part of... Donald Trump is the great magician who, by a magic trick, is going to get rid of the U.S. debt but lowering American taxes. And he's going to do that. The three magic tricks, I think, that he's going to get rid of the U.S. debt is he's going to get DOGE to find all that fraud and waste in the bureaucracy, which is creating. And so we've actually found some. So we don't actually, our debt is actually not as big as they tell us. The second magic trick that's going to get rid of the debt, I can still lower your taxes and make you rich, is tariffs. Foreigners are going to pay taxes because they've been ripping us off for years. Tariffs is the second trick. The magician is going to make the debt go away. The third is Bitcoin. I read an article this morning that they're going to pay off the debt with Bitcoin. Wow. I wouldn't think of that before. And then the fourth, I heard him say today, doubling down and making Canada the 51st state, is because, hey, we give them $200 billion of subsidies a year, which is not true. But it's somebody else's fault. It's not your fault. You're the voter. It's not your fault that we have this debt. It's Canada's fault. That's like fentanyl. Fentanyl's not your fault that your people take it. It's Canada's fault. It's Mexico's fault. So this is what I think. This is what we're getting into. When I think of how he's the magician who's going to get rid of the debt, and he's going to do it all these ways. That's not going to happen, I think. And this is going to come to a head March 14th when they have to have a reconciliation bill and raise the debt limit. But I think this is when you can see why is this relationship turned in this way? First of all, Trump doesn't like allies. I don't think he likes having a vice president. He'll attack allies as opposed to enemies. He always will. The people closest to you go after them first. And I think this is one of the things. I think the main danger is internal, actually. I don't think Canada has to worry too much going, at least for a number of years.
What do you mean by internal? Tell me what the fears are amongst the people. Well, and I mean, that's not just fears, because there are people who voted for Trump and who knew that this was going to happen. So I want to be clear about that. But what are the internal implications of all of this?
Okay, so first of all, on the campaign trail, he never mentioned Canada becoming the 51st state. He never mentioned Greenland, and he never mentioned Gaza. None of that was ever mentioned on the campaign trail. And I've asked people who did vote, some students here, did they know that Elon Musk was going to be as powerful as he is? Some say no, they didn't know that. And some say, But internally, I think the only thing that's putting a check on Musk and Trump is an independent judiciary. I think that's because Congress, of course, power of the purse is in Congress. James Madison, Federalist 58, power of the purse is in the House of Representatives. Alexander Hamilton, Federalist 78, the legislature commands the purse. These are the people who wrote the Constitution. So the only Republicans in Congress will not stand up to bring back the power of the purse, right, to spend money. So, for example, we're here at Baylor. We got an email this morning. All federal grants from Health and Human Services, they said, they put a cap of 15% for indirect spending. I'm not sure. That's how grants work. So you get a grant, a multi-year grant. That's it. Psychology, health and human sciences, medicine, nursing, all of them have federal grants. The indirect costs for the graduate students that are employed by them. So got an email just this morning. We're working with our partners in Washington. This money was raised by Congress and directed to be spent this way. Congress clearly has the power of the purse, but I think that no Republican thinks that they can win in their district or state if MAGA is not behind them. So they're not going to claim the power of the purse. So it's judiciary. Engelmeyer's stopped Doge from getting into the Treasury because Congress is the one. And it's actually in the Constitution. You can only withdraw money from the Treasury as it's done by law, which is made by Congress. And that's actually in the Constitution. Musk is doubling down online, saying that we should impeach judges. J.D. Vance is saying their judges are acting illegally and legitimate executive power. But I'll tell you, go read the Constitution, read the Federalist Papers, power of the purse is in Congress.
So, clearly wild times,
Right.
Unprecedented, I'm sure, especially, for someone like you that's teaching this stuff.
I've lived a number of years, about 20 years altogether. This is unprecedented.
Yeah. So, for today's show, we really want to better understand how this is affecting personal relationships and just the conversations that Canadians are having with their American friends, colleagues, and whatnot. So you have a class, probably more than one class, but you're working with students. So I'm very curious. You asked them if they knew that Elon Musk would have this much power, but what kind of questions and conversations are you eavesdropping on from that group?
Okay, well, first I would say the faculty is most important. So there's three Canadians in the political science department at Regina. And at first, when this happened before the inauguration, you talked about 51st state, American colleagues were generally apologetic and thought this is ridiculous. This morning, after last night, I was coming up with a graduate student in the elevator and they said, "Are Canadians worried?" So not because I actually think this is going to happen, but this is unprecedented. And so what's going on? And just why these threats? Why is this happening? This wasn't said on the campaign trail. But it's interesting though. Generally, we avoid politics. Politics is extremely divisive in the United States, and generally we don't talk direct politics to each other. The faculty, the graduate students here at Baylor, and I think most faculty members are. I do have to say this. I think embarrassed and embarrassed for the country, but. They believe, for those who voted for him, they think that the constitutional structures will hold. They held last time, they'll hold this time.
What kind of campus is Baylor University? I apologize for not knowing, but is it more of a liberal university, or you are in Texas? But
it's conservative. It's a Christian.
It's conservative. Okay, it is. Yeah.
It's an R1 institution, though. But that's the greatest divide, right, among people: the diploma divide and how you vote, the degree. So it's conservative, but. Yeah, it's a conservative campus. It's a Christian campus. We all have to be members of a Christian faith community. We have to be practicing members of that. The students have to sign an honor code. It's a conservative campus. But generally, political discussions are, even on a conservative campus, are hard. But I think that was true. That's been true since 2016. I'd say people don't talk. It's so divisive that people don't talk about it. And you have to be careful. If you try and introduce politics, you have to be... It's not, I think that's a clear break. So everybody understands that sort of if to be able to get along and to be able not to fight, it's actually not to talk politics that much.
So what position does that put you in? You're a Canadian. You teach American politics. You're at this university where it is conservative. So what's that like for you?
I have wonderful students and wonderful colleagues. Americans like Canadians. That's why I think this is strange. What's going on here? So I've never had I was a graduate student in the United States. I taught for 2 years at a university in Las Vegas before returning to Regina. I've taught here, my 8th year here, and I've never had. So Trump this is unprecedented, I think, in an American president to be this. And I think what he's trying to do is to start an Indigenous annexationist movement within Canada. So let's say in Saskatchewan, Alberta, if you got a section of the population there that said, like the Anschluss, like Austria becomes part of Germany. We want to be part of the United States and to try and get a referendum there. I think that's probably one of the things that Trump is trying to do and his people are trying to do is to start a native annexation movement within certain provinces within Canada. I think that's what they're trying to do with Greenland as well. It's only 54,000 people. Try to get people themselves there to start saying, yeah, we want to be part of the United States. So rely on the division. So Canada had this problem of separation. Now we have this problem coming south of the border, right? And so to rely on the divisions within Canada, let's say, I think Quebec and Ontario will probably make up their differences. But the other, I think that would be the goal. I don't know. I haven't been, my tendency is to think that won't work. And I don't think it's going to work in BC, but I'm not sure. I was listening to Scott Moe and I was listening to Poilievre. Poilievre sounded a lot like Trump there when he's imitating his rhetoric, right? So,
like I said, wild times and just trying to make sense of it all. And I do think navigating some of those personal relationships are some of the most difficult at a time like this. Like it's raising tensions that maybe weren't there before. And I know you're staying with us for the remainder of the show. I've got more questions for you, but I just want to introduce someone else to the program. Listening is Carol Cairns. She's a dual citizen who goes back and forth between Chicago and here in Saskatchewan. People in the Bangoff area will know her for her work with the Gateway Music Festival. And in Regina, folks may know her from her time running the Artful Dodger restaurant and music venue. Carol has most recently been a teacher in Chicago, but today she's in our Regina studio. Carol, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So you have feet firmly planted in both Canada and the U.S. right now. How are you feeling at this moment?
Well, it's all the divisiveness, the uncertainty. It's disturbing. But one of the things that disturbs me is how many people in Saskatchewan, and well, actually in Canada, that are supporting what Trump is saying. In Chicago, it kind of blows me away. But I'm happy that Canada is becoming more patriotic towards Canada too. They see the importance. But in the States, in Chicago, being a sanctuary city and very progressive thinking, and my friends and colleagues are, they see Canada as the Europe of North America. They love Canada. They can't believe there'd be any negativity towards Canada. But my family and friends that are Trump supporters are the opposite. They won't budge. They're adamantly supporting Trump. So I'm trying to figure out why that is. Why is there such a divide on the way people see things? I'm involved in the art community in Chicago, and I was asking a group of artists, and I said, what do you think about, Canada, what Canada is saying and doing in response to the threat of tariffs? And they had no animosity whatsoever. They're like, they put all the blame onto Trump. What do you expect Canada to do? And why would we have any negativity towards Canada? They see us as a close ally and very interconnected. But Trump supporters, I'm trying to figure out where is that coming from? And I really believe part of it is the narrow sources of information that they're getting. And if you are... So I started I don't know if I should say, but so I started watching some Fox News just to see and listen to some very right-wing radio stations in the States, and just to see what information they're getting. And it's very edited. and very limited in scope, and it's very passionate towards supporting Trump, and everything is swung a different way, that if that's all you are hearing and seeing, it's no wonder you have such a bias and, why you're so adamantly supporting Trump, because you're believing it all if you don't do any fact-checking. Whereas my friends and colleagues that I predominantly am with, they access multiple sources of information, they're fact-checking and all of that, because as just as artists, that's how you think. You look at the world around you, you absorb it all, you process it, you think critically about it, and then you regurgitate it in a creative way. So you're constantly looking at the world from a wider view, a more expanded view, and I guess it just comes more naturally if that's how you're conditioned to think. But it's tough.
Yeah. So for the people you're connected with who are Trump supporters, what has this done to your relationship?
It's extremely difficult. It's emotional, because they're close friends and family, and you can't. You try to do some fact checking, but they're just. It's extremely hard. You have to be careful. I have one family member who will, do some fact checking and send it out in our group chat, and it's met with just a wall of resistance, and there's no way you can change their mind, and they don't understand why we don't see it.
And that's actually interesting. And do you have any insight? Like, I know what you said about looking at the media they're consuming, and you can understand why they might think the way they do based on what they're consuming. But even going further than that, like, have you attempted to understand why do they think the way they do? What benefits could they have from a Trump? Could they gain from a Trump presidency? That sort of thing?
Yes, there's multiple columns why people support Trump and why they're responding the way they are. One, it's the religious belief in that supports their belief in anti-abortion, anti-gay, anti-trans, and that's one column. Another column, and they believe to some people, no, I'm not saying all my family, but that are Trump supporters, but there are people who believe that Trump was chosen for this time. And anyway, and then another column is, unfortunately, this self-entitlement, where the fear of the other. Trump has done a marvelous job of creating that sense of the other. And with that sense of other becomes fear and all of that. And then fear is also the taking away of what is mine, right? The other is going to take all this. So there's a lot of that as well. So, and there's a couple more columns that is just on a broad scale why people are reacting the way they are, and it gets quite aggressive in response, where it's like besides the other, just blatant racism, but also the biggest thing is the fear of the other, I think, is a lot of it. And then there's the third column where they do believe that Trump will fix everything and the economy will be great. He's going to make everything great again. And they totally,
as he says.
Yeah, and they totally buy into that. So
we're speaking to people with strong connections to the United States who've got friends, family, colleagues. Carol Cairns is in our Regina studio. She's has her feet firmly planted in two places, both in Canada and the U.S. right now, Chicago and Regina. Carol, I wanted to ask you, as you talk through just sort of making sense of how some friends, very close friends and family, how they can think the way they do. For some Saskatchewan people, it's pretty easy if they feel strongly about this to cancel a trip to Palm Springs. They're just not going to go. They'll go somewhere else. They'll go to Mexico. But for you can't just sever those ties in that same way. So I'm just wondering how you're grappling with some of this stuff. Like, will you be heading to the U.S. In the short term? Or just, how are you working through that?
I believe that Canada needs to support Canada and buy Canadian product and support Canada. And it's touchy because, I just came back from Chicago a couple days ago.
Oh, just a couple days ago,
yeah.
Right. Okay. Mm-hmm.
But it's a hard thing to navigate because you don't want to punish the individual either. And what Trump is doing, and the whole administration, it's like you're playing the powers that be, the judges, the court system, the Congress, it's like playing whack-a-mole. It's like there's just another thing, and it creates this chaos, and there's so many people being injured by this, individuals in the U.S. and Canada, and it will be Mexico as well. So it's like I struggle with that because I believe both countries need to support themselves first. And but I have emotional ties to Chicago too, as my birthplace and everything. But but I definitely, in Canada, I will be buying Canadian predominantly.
Yeah, that's tomorrow's show. We're going to focus just on buying Canadian tomorrow on Blue Sky. What about the people here in Regina? When they find out you're American, how do they react to you?
Good, pretty good.
I hear like some reluctance. I don't know.
Well,
Is that a good question?
Well, a lot of it is joking, but I've had more trouble coming back into Canada than I have crossing the border into the States. When I cross the border, they say, welcome home, and it's all the way across. Everyone I encounter when they know I just came back from Canada, it's welcome home. When I come into Canada, it's why were you in the States? It's like I don't. But this time, since all of this stuff has been happening at the airport just a few days ago, they said, welcome back. And I just about hugged them. I'm like, it's, I think the positive to all of this, it's making us acknowledge what we value and question what is it we value. And Canada is a special place that people are protective about losing it, and they see America as the enemy. Not everybody, but sometimes comments are made that anti-American everything, and you are also a face of that. So, a little bit of animosity comes through even with the jokes, because in every joke there's a little line of truth.
A little grain of truth. Jeez, yeah. I want to ask you about one more thing before we say goodbye to you, Carol. You had some friends reaching out to you last night. They had watched the Super Bowl. And they saw an ad. Do you want to set this up? Just tell us what they saw and the conversation that ensued.
Well, actually, it popped up on my Facebook on their story. They had posted an ad that ran during the Super Bowl. Ontario had created this ad saying about the steelworkers and all the resources that Ontario has and what an ally it is to the States.
We actually have it.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so let's listen to the ad.
And they were laughing about it, saying, look at this, yay Canada for sticking up for yourself. So
let's listen.
Ontario is your third largest trading partner and the number one export destination for 17 states. Our long-standing economic partnership keeps millions of Americans working. In a changing world, it's time to bring jobs back home and build together. More workers, more trade, more prosperity, more security. For generations, this ally to the north has been here. And for generations more, we'll still be here, right by your side.
Okay, so that's a Government of Ontario ad that was played to some American viewers. And just for some context, Ontario now in a provincial election. So people were that they took note of that, I guess. Hey, Carol?
Yes, they loved it. They were laughing. They actually posted it twice on their story feed, just because they were, they don't see any negativity towards Canada whatsoever. So yeah, they're celebrating it. They're like, they thought it was funny, that it was hilarious that Canada would put that during the Super Bowl, knowing Trump was there, and it was just a perfect little, here we are. Don't forget.
Yeah. It's been good talking to you today, Carol. I wish you luck with those difficult relationships, but listening to you today may help others as they're trying to process this moment in time and how we navigate all of our relationships. So, Carol, thank you.
Thank you. It's just really hard because you have to let people be who they are, right? And so it's sort of like how we respond to it. So yeah.
Thanks, Carol.
All right, thank you.
That's Carol Cairns, a dual citizen who goes back and forth between Chicago and here in Saskatchewan. Now, we do often refer to Americans as our neighbors. In one Saskatchewan community, residents of the United States are literally their neighbors. North Portal, Saskatchewan, and Portal, North Dakota share many things: a volunteer fire department, a gas station, a golf course. Amy Armstrong is mayor of North Portal. She also volunteers with that fire department, and she joins us right now. Mayor Armstrong, hello.
Hi there.
So you've been listening. Yeah, thanks for being with us. You've been listening to all these conversations so far. I'm sure some of it mirrors your experience and other things not at all. So just tell us about how you're navigating relationships with your literal American neighbors.
I would say not a lot has changed just because we both are so mutually dependent on each other. Both communities have so many things that we share with each other, whether it is that golf course, like you had said. So the clubhouse is actually situated in the US, and so is Hole 9, and the rest of the golf course is actually in Canada. So you can actually come here, not need a passport, and golf it. So that is a big draw in the summer, obviously. And then, like you had said, our fire departments, we have members from both Canada and US on it. So, and actually, one thing that's interesting, they go down about 6 kilometers south, but most of the coverage area is actually in Canada.
So you're working very closely then with your American volunteer counterparts. What have those conversations been like these days?
I kind of spoke with our fire chief, and we don't really let the economic pressure and all of the politics kind of dictate how we are with each other. It really honestly hasn't changed anything. I go over almost daily across the states, and I've had no issues going down or coming up. And I think they feel the same way too.
How do you avoid, though, the feeling of tension that so many others are feeling? Like, you have such you're so uniquely set up. And I know you've been through a lot of things together before, like 9/11 comes to mind, or, just living through a pandemic. And when you've got such a close community that straddles a border like that, how do you not let tensions get in the way of some of those relationships?
I think that's exactly it. I think they have gone through so many ups and downs, whether it was September 11th or the pandemic, that this isn't the first time this has happened. But so many of these people have grown up together, and most people are, like their best friend lives across there. I just know that with the pandemic and stuff, people still met. Like, we have the grid road would be one of the borders that they would stand on each side of the ditch to still see each other.
Yeah. So, and even something like going to get gas, you were mentioning to me that the gas station is on the U.S. side. So you are very much directly impacted by what's going on right now when it comes to how the dollar is doing. Can you just explain that side of things?
Yeah, so most of the service are down in Portal, North Dakota. So our gas station, I can see it from my house, but I do have to go across to get to the gas station. Same with the restaurant and bar. That would be on the American side as well. So we do still support the businesses. Obviously, kind of hard with the dollar the way it is, but we do still try to go across. There's a lot of rec activities also. So they do bingo and darts also, which tends to be on the American side as well. So I guess we are going across there a lot more than what, other than in the summer, that is kind of the draw for the Canadian side, would be coming across to the golf course. But
To the golf course. What do you make then of the response to this? So many people saying, buy Canadian, boycott American products. What are your thoughts on that?
I understand that, and I do also support buying Canadian. But when we're such a small town, we do have to support the locals there too. You know, we go across to Rosie's Cantina and we support her, and, you know, you support the golf course, because all of them are our friends. Most of the people have grown up together with them. Like, I just know I've been told stories because I'm not originally from here. So I've been told stories that say before September 11th, you really didn't have to show any paperwork. Like the kids would, you know, if the parent worked across the line, you know, the kids rode their bikes over there. They didn't have to show any passports. So they were used to going back and forth. And I think so the older generations are so used to not having to have that divided and international border. They just came back and forth so frequently.
Do you know how people voted? Like, do you ever talk about politics? Do you have any idea if any of your neighbors are Trump supporters?
I did bring it up once, and the fire chief had said he has really nothing to do with politics. I don't think it's something he really thinks of. But no, I was told you don't bring up politics.
I think a lot of people were told that. Do you have any advice, though, for people, or just any reflections, knowing that you have so many American people who you're close to? What would you say to others who are finding it really difficult right now to navigate these relationships?
I just think you have to think of the people first. You know, all of this, you can't let it harm the interest of all of us. You know, we have connections to each other, and that's what's important.
Well, I appreciate being able to have this conversation with you. I learned a lot about North Portal through this, so thank you, Mayor Armstrong.
Thank you for having me.
That is Amy Armstrong, the mayor of North Portal. North Portal, Saskatchewan and Portal, North Dakota share many things. Like I said, a volunteer fire department, a gas station, and a golf course. I'm Leisha Gravinsky. You are listening to Blue Sky. Today, our question for you is, how are tensions between the U.S. and Canada bleeding into your relationships with American friends and family? How are you navigating this? 1-800-716-2221. You can also email bluesky@cbc.ca. So Shirley sent a note. She emailed us and says, I have several groups of family in Montana, Tennessee, and Texas. Most are embarrassed as to what is happening and hope that the rest of the world doesn't see them in the same light. My one relative in Tennessee is so brainwashed, he just believes things will all work out. I have a hard time now discussing these issues with him as I am close to this person and want to be sensitive, so I'm not calling right now. How are you navigating things? Again, 1-800-716-2221. You can also email bluesky@cbc.ca. We kicked off the show with Anne Ward, who's a Canadian citizen, and for years she taught American politics at the University of Regina's Campion College. She's now at Baylor University in Waco, Texas. And you've had the privilege of listening to the last couple of conversations, how people are navigating their personal relationships. What comes to mind for you as you listen to those?
Yes, well, I also have family members, two family members who live in Florida. They actually own a business in West Palm Beach, and I was visiting. I have a new great nephew who was born there. So he luckily came in before Trump tried to strike out birthright citizenship, which is also being held up by the federal judiciary. And I have family members who support Trump, and how I deal. So I was flying back in July to visit my mother, who I had to transition into a retirement home in Ontario. And the lady on the plane beside me at Waco Airport, I could see she was talking on the phone. We hadn't taken off about the assassination attempt. And she said it was divine intervention. Like, uh-oh. And Carol said a similar thing. Why? There's religious, and that happened, that belief in divine intervention. And the Republicans kind of, Scott at the Republican convention, things like this, was already to an audience that was religiously primed. Anti-abortion, anti-trans, so that happened in a religiously primed audience. So when I talk to my family member, there's a number of things too, but religion is connected to race in the United States, especially in the South. So for example, all the discussion of the attack on DEI. So I was
diversity, equity, inclusion, yeah.
Diversity, equity, inclusion. So here at Baylor, I was on the Arts and Science Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee. Texas legislature banned the word equity, so we had to take that out, and we called ourselves diversity and belonging. So this is free speech. And then now we're doing a postdoc, research and teaching excellence postdoc coming out of the committee research committee I chair there, And there's feeling nervous that this is not going to be funded anymore. But I was talking to the Associate Dean of Diversity and Belonging here, and we were talking about all the Christian schools in Texas, elementary, high school, because Brown v. Board of Education, 1954, that was dealing with public schools, right? So Brown v. Board of Education, most Southerners were going to public schools in 1954. So I was asking my colleague, she's African-American from the South, when did these Christian schools, they came up after Brown v. Board of Education, because Brown v. Board of Education dealt with public schooling. It didn't deal with private schooling. And so, people can't say I'm withdrawing my child from the public system and putting them in the private because I don't want them going to school with African Americans. Okay, that's too much, right? I'm withdrawing my child from the public system because it's corrupt, and this represents my religious values. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important to know, right? That's how it became. America's actually increased in its religiosity after Brown v. Board of Education. Right? So you have those two things are wedded together in the United States, religion and race. Yeah. And so, when I talk to my family, though, there's a third aspect of this, is desire for money. It's so, Tocqueville talks about this, but Americans have to be careful about this. It doesn't take over the entire soul. It would have a desire for money. And I think that's one of the key. They think that they had people who showed up at inauguration parties in gold dresses and suits and things like that. And so my family, that's what they like about it. He's a businessman. He's a natural businessman. And Trump has called America a company.
Yeah.
But Twitter doesn't have an independent judiciary. Nation state does. So
you're listening to Anne Ward, who is a Canadian citizen, but for years she has taught American politics. She taught it in Regina, University of Regina's Campion College, and now she's at Baylor University in Waco, Texas. We have been asking you to share with us how you're navigating different relationships right now with U.S. friends and family and colleagues. We actually have a caller on the line who wants to join the conversation. So Tom in Saskatoon. Hello to you, Tom.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. What are your thoughts today?
Well, you know what? I've just started developing a web page, and most of the services that I'm accessing, the vast majority of them are American. So the currency on the exchange rate kills me, but more importantly, they are good people. And I have not ever in my entire lifetime came across an American who was not a good person. And that includes trips to Phoenix and listening to people that are very strong Trump supporters, etc. I believe, put the person first is very important in all the logic that we're thinking about. I do believe on a democratic level, Trump was elected because they believed that Trump believed in democracy. I think Trump's concept of democracy is more about Trump's power and is using that influence with the populist people in the states.
So, Tom, I want to ask you a question. How do you think Canada should respond to someone like Trump? What are your thoughts on what we've done so far? But how do you think Canada should be responding to the threats that Trump is making?
Well, I like Scott Moe's idea about we treat them as people first. I believe that is very important. But I also believe there's real purpose behind trying to create our own plan. And one of the things I really like that's come out of all of this is this notion that Canada needs to be more united, and that we also need, from a business perspective, to get rid of things that hinder us becoming more independent as a country on an economic level. And so I think that's that's the one value that comes to me from all of this babbling that Trump does. It's very difficult separating his babble from what his intention is. And so I do believe what has happened is Canadians anyway, whether the politicians follow through on it, I don't know, but Canadians anyway, I think their voice is saying we need to be more independent.
Okay. Tom, I appreciate you picking up the phone and calling. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, that's Tom in Saskatoon. You can give us a call too, 1-800-716-2221. You can email bluesky@cbc.ca. We are asking you today how tensions with the U.S. is bleeding into your relationships with American friends and family. How are you navigating that? But also just how we're responding to President Donald Trump, his threat of tariffs. We'll learn more about this at 1 o'clock in just 8-9 minutes. We have a CBC Radio 1 special in just a few moments to cover the possibility of U.S. tariffs on Canada's steel and aluminum industries. So that is coming up in a few minutes. Here's an email that we got from Morena, who writes, many snowbirds embrace the 51st state idea as they can stay in the sun for the rest of their life and collect a Canadian pension. They actually do not care about the fact that some state will become anti-lifestyle choice, anti-abortion, and healthcare becoming a for-profit supply and demand market. The only hope is a mass migration to the social media app Blue Sky, as today's government uses data in nefarious ways. All things Trump are a distraction, whilst his team armed with social media data are gutting democracy. I'm speaking today with Ann Ward, and do you have any thoughts either on that email from Morena or from the caller Tom?
Of course, we treat them like people. And again, I've always had excellent relationships with Americans. And that's why I think Donald Trump is so unusual and his team is unusual. And people should take note of that. He doesn't like us. And I think he's out of character for an American to be like that. I also think there's a congressman from Florida said, well, if they become the 51st state, Brian Doran, there's a race for governor in Florida. They should become like a territory like Puerto Rico. So you'd be absorbed, but wouldn't have any voting rights, right? Because Canada would be the largest state. We'd be bigger than California, so we'd have the largest congressional caucus. We'd have 2 senators, or if we became 3 states, we'd have 6. So I don't want any of that. Canadians should think, do you want to take your trip to Florida? Maybe they should stop doing that. I mean, I really think Canadians think about not doing that. I mean, Florida and to target, I think Canada should have diversified its economy a long time ago, but it's so easy just to send to the United States. And again,
but I just want to stop you there, because I wanted to ask you what individual Canadians could maybe do in this moment. And so I heard you right. Like if you were planning to go to Florida. Think about canceling that trip.
Cancel the trip to Florida. Yeah, cancel the trip to Florida. They actually had towns and cities in Florida, townships that wanted to become French the second language. And if there's going to be a second language, it's going to be Spanish. But so many Canadians are there. It'd be a huge impact on the economy. And I don't go to Florida. Try to buy Canadian when you can. Get off social media. Get off X. Subaru. I'm sorry, Starlink isn't Subaru. And I do think that this is a threat, the control of information. So apparently now the NTSB has to do all their communications through X. So for the federal government to speak to the citizens, it has to go through a private communication system. The French prosecutor in France is investigating X for their algorithms. And they're also coming in Germany because of Musk's support of the AFD, which is very disturbing. So get off X. I know that might be hard. I think politicians should be off X. Blue Sky, there's an alternative. Or I'm not on social media, and I realize that it's hard because, like Carol, right, who started to watch Fox, to actually know what's being thought, you have to go on. But I think Musk is a very dangerous person. And I do hope that the courts can contain him and that he's not successful in intimidating the courts.
And I have to ask you, because you obviously have lived in Regina a long time, have you reconsidered and I think that's you can't just pick up and leave. You got a job and all that. I know these are complicated decisions, but have you contemplated, is this where you want to be? Or have you thought about moving back to Canada?
Well, being a professor is hard. You have to go where the job is. And I was brought down here by my mentor because my graduate work is in New York City, Ford in New York City. So, and then I'm actually I'll probably get my citizenship sometime in July. We're already on the path to that because I have 5 years of permanent resident. I have thought of moving back, but one of the things if I stay, I have thought of moving back, but it's hard. I'm a full professor, so a job would have to come up that you apply to come back to. But I'm not as young as I used to be, so I might be, although there's no official retirement age. But one thing, though, I do want to become a citizen because I do want to vote. Donald Trump speaks about a mandate. This was one of the closest elections in 100 years between Kamala Harris and Donald. Every vote does count.
Interesting.
And so if I do live here, I want to be able to influence the political system. So that's one of the key reasons we'd be doing this is through the vote. But I have thought.
So you've had these thoughts.
Yes.
I've appreciated being able to have this conversation with you. I think it's fascinating that you are teaching in the United States right now, and you've had a lot to share with us today. So huge thanks for being one of our guests today, Anne. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's enjoyable.
That is Anne Ward, a Canadian citizen, as you heard, working on her American citizenship. She, for years, taught American politics at the University of Regina's Campion College, and now she's at Baylor University in Waco, Texas.